everybody. Today, my guest is Hunter Montgomery. Hunter is the CMO of ChurnZero. Hunter's been in B2B tech for around 20 years, and in particular in B2B SaaS for about 15 years. He has seen it all. He's been there, done that, and he's here to tell us all about it. So, Hunter, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So for those of us who don't know about ChurnZero, you want to tell us a bit about what your work at ChurnZero?
Sure. So ChurnZero is a obviously B2B SaaS company that helps B2B SaaS companies keep their customers happy. Obviously the name churn, that's the big metric now, and one of the big metrics now for SaaS organizations. You don't want your customers to churn. Not only not churn, you want them to do more with you. If it spend more, add more users, whatever it may be, kind of the whole net revenue retention that everybody's is focused on now. So we're a platform that allows you to really understand who your customers are, what they're doing, how they're using your product, and make sure they're successful with it and continue to use you.
Mm-hmm. And can you describe a little bit about what some of the unique aspects of selling SaaS to other SaaS companies? How is that different?
I think the one thing I think we understand is that there are a lot of options out there. Like there are a lot of products. I think what Scott Brinker's last map had like 5,000 B2B tech tools that you can use. So I think one of the things you need to know is there's always another one out there. It maybe slightly has more features than you, maybe a little bit more of a niche product, but can do one thing better than you can. So you have to really understand where you fit. I think it makes you hone in and refine how you position yourself, so somebody really knows, okay, what's the value I'm going to get out of your product? What do you do? How am I going to use you? And can I get it up and running quickly? Like we don't want a 6-month implementation. So because we buy and use other SaaS tools, we understand that you need to have everything kind of like really locked down when you start to talk to the prospects and in the customers.
Mm-hmm. Who is the exact target persona in that SaaS company? Let's say it's a medium-sized SaaS company with say 50 to 100 employees. Who's the target
For
persona
ChurnZero?
or the ICP? Yeah.
I mean, it's a customer success leader, could be a director.
Okay.
That is, I think the last couple of years on LinkedIn, it was one of the top 5 to 10 new roles. So customer success is growing rapidly as a practice and people. So it's a director level or above. A lot more companies now are having chief customer officers. We did a survey last year. We have another one actually running right now, where we sort of asked all these SaaS CS people, where do you fit in your organization, right? Do you have a seat at the table? Are you at board meetings? Are you an executive? Do you report directly to the CEO? And we're seeing those numbers go up and up every year. So it is not anybody in marketing. Like it is really targeted. And for us, it's somebody that does have that CS role, because to use the platform, you need to really have an understanding and need a team, right? It's not meant for one or two CSMs. It's meant for a group and a kind of a scaling organization.
Can you tell me, in your opinion, how ownership of the churn problem is shared across a typical SaaS company?
Yeah.
Okay, so a chief CS, who's your primary buyer, he owns part of it, or she. Who else has ownership or skin in the game and for this churn problem?
Yeah, I think the companies that are maturing more and really understand it, they put a lot of the onus on the sales team, right? Marketing somewhat, we have to create the message and the ICP and target the right people, and we've been doing that for years already, right? We know who we want to target in sick and size, and but on the sales side, they're really, and especially at ChurnZero, we have a constant conversation going on between sales, marketing, and CS, but really the sales and the CS team are talking because they want to know when they bring somebody in that they're truly ready. I mentioned about the data. One of their big things is when you're going to come into our platform, you better know where your data is and your data is clean. because a CS platform is only as good as the data that comes in, like any other tool you use. So I think we have that conversation going on. Now, it's a little hard because it may take 6 to 9 months before you know that that customer really wasn't a good fit. Um,
Mhm.
but when you start to refine that, you're getting rid of those ones that a month in, the customer says, wait a minute, the sales guy told me you can do this. You're telling me you can't do this now? Those
Mhm.
conversations, for the most part, have gone away because that CS team is so active, owns a number, has onboarding where we do MPS scores for onboarding. So because that is constantly checking the health of someone and not waiting for the renewal, the annual renewal, 3 months out, I have a call. Hey, how's it going?
Mhm.
So I think that on the sales side, that's something that I've seen, at least at this organization more than any other I've been at, is has to have some ownership in that. And they do.
Mhm. Yeah. Does that mean that a customer success might even get on some of those sales calls towards the end of that process just
We
to
we try to make
shadow?
that transition, yep, and we have a lot of it too is with our SEs, right? I mean, everyone's had the sales engineers as an important part of the process, but even for us, because they know the questions asked, they know about how you set, how you prepared. We do
Mhm.
give a little bit of background on the implementation. Here's what it's going to be. Here's just so you know, here's what you need to do to get set up. And yes, there are occasions when someone really wants to understand a prospect. We'll bring one of our CS leaders on to have a call. Could even be our chief customer officer, Abby Hammer. She'll get on calls for some of those bigger deals where they really want to
Mhm.
understand the process. And having them be available for that, again, is another part of just trying to filter through and make sure the right people are coming on board.
Mhm. I'd love if you could share some benchmarks with me if you have any. I'm really curious to know what's a good churn rate for a B2B SaaS company. Let's say the cohort's 2 years old. How many of that cohort should be retained for you to say, "Wow,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
an elite low churn rate."
that's a tough one. The benchmarks are always tough because there's so many factors in how you set it up. But once you get
Mhm.
somebody that's in there for 2 years, I mean,
Yeah.
that churn's it's got to be Betty super low, right? It's
Mhm.
the biggest churns are year one, right? And
Mhm.
that's where onboarding is crucial. You and finding the right fit, right? You got to get those people
Mhm.
in, and if they're not, you got to flush them out quickly. But
Mhm.
by year two, now you're working at expanding that, right? That's that 100 and 105% net retention, revenue retention. You are keeping the
Mhm.
clients and you're finding ways to either move them up, like if you have additions, right? Oh, now they're ready for enterprise, or you have new feature sets, or they're growing too and they need more licenses. So above
Mhm.
100% is something I think a good solid SaaS company with 2 years out, customers been down there for 2 years, they're
Mhm.
settled in, and they should be well plugged in and focused.
Yeah. And most of that churn happens in the first year, but isn't it even shorter? Maybe the first, say, 3 months or 6
Well, again,
months
it
in
depends
some
on
cases?
if you're monthly, annual. If you're an annual contract,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's going
Mhm.
to be it'll be that first year. But we are doing much. We right now very much the kind of marketing tries to do and sales try to do and kind of profiling and projecting out. The pipeline, if you will. We are able to use our churn scores, our health scores of our customers to look at the upcoming quarter. We're doing quarterly, and
Mhm.
our CS teams know how they're going to do. And just as almost as well as a sales team looks at their upcoming quarter and all the factors they're using and what they're going to hit in terms of their number, we're doing that on our revenue and our churn,
Mhm.
because we've set up enough data points along the way to know what the likelihood of someone is to stay with us or renew or not. So
Mhm.
um, it's good to have all this data in there.
Yeah. Is your solution also effective for a product-led growth SaaS company? How does
That's
that change the equation?
I mean, I think that it, the, it depends on obviously the end user. Like for us, yes, there's enough set up. We have walkthroughs, right? So your customers on your platform now, you can set up walkthroughs to make sure they're doing the right things for their onboarding. Like you don't have to. The idea of having a call with a CSM once a week or once a quarter or whatever it is not as critical when you now know how you can set them up based on the data. Like we have one customer we know, like they say, look, if our customers do this one thing within the first 3 months, their likelihood of renewing goes up tenfold, because it's a feature that is so critical for how they use the product, that's in what they can do to drive and make sure, if you're using it, I'm not going to contact you. If you haven't used it yet, I can set up in-app notifications. I can set up walkthroughs. I can do some
Hmm.
things to really push you along. We're integrated with an LMS. And so we can make you take some classes. If you don't pass that class, we know that's kind of a red flag. But if you pass that class, because we move you on to the next stage. And you may, again,
Hmm.
kind of back the whole idea, they're going to walk themselves through. They're going to know the milestones they have to hit as a customer. And when they're successful, the system will just let them go on to the next thing. So there is a lot
Hmm.
of being able to walk people through the product and understand where they are, target them, and then keep them going along.
Hmm.
So I think so. It's as I mentioned, I think when we were talking a little bit beforehand, one of the things that probably got growth is some products, especially for us, for a CS product, it's new, it's a new practice, and not everybody knows how they need to do all the different things to be successful. So you do need a little bit of hand holding. I mean, think about it 15 years ago. If someone on the marketing side said, well, here's this new marketing automation, it's great. It's going to make you be able to do all these things and automate and target and score, like that's great, but where do I start? Like we haven't done this before. Like someone needs to kind of give me a little bit of the push. You can do
Hmm.
that digitally, but in some ways, I think people like to have that expert that they can talk to and who can
Hmm.
and help them and understand how to do the product.
Yeah. This seems like something that every SaaS company needs now. But how in the world of SaaS, imagine the total addressable market. How many SaaS companies have a solution like yours?
I think the latest study is probably a little bit under 50%. I
Okay,
think
so
there's
there's
there's a
still
lot of room
half of the market is still to be conquered for
lot of room to
for,
grow,
for
right?
you and a few others. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not to mention that the world of SaaS, I mean, the pie itself is getting a lot
it keeps
bigger
getting
because
bigger, right?
SaaS seems to be just conquering the world
Yeah,
steadily.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it's really, you're selling to the ultimate pain point, which is that you have a leaky bucket and we're the solution that's going to help plug those holes. Do you look at it that way, or do you typically in your marketing communication do you highlight the pain, or do you have another maybe a little more optimistic
Well,
tone around
I
it?
think you do a little bit of I think you do a little bit of both, right? There's always a little bit of fear,
Hmm.
but always a little bit of the positive side is like it's the growth, it's the opportunity to expand. Like, it's not so
Hmm.
much, you know, the the leaky bucket's a little reactive mindset where expanding and I guess, a little bit of the retaining is trying to get people to be proactive. I mean, I think
Hmm.
the SaaS world understands there's all these data points. We're collecting it. It's becoming easier and easier to bring all the data together. We've been doing it for a while. We do all the different tech stacks. So when you can actually really, really understand how your customer is, who your customer is, because you kind of have to segment it in some ways, probably depending on what your industry is, um, how they're using your product, how often they're using your product, all these different things, and you can bring it in and then target them that way. There is a positive story of really understanding the customer, and customer centricity is sort of it's been overused probably over the years, where
Hmm.
I think now finally the technology's caught up to it, where if
Hmm.
everybody in the organization can see how the customers are doing. I mean, we have an integration with Slack. I can type in, tell me about XYZ company, and up in my Slack comes up a profile of that company, their health
Hmm.
score, their contract size, whatever you want to bring in. And then if I want to see more, it'll give me even more information.
Hmm.
The CEO can do that if he doesn't want to log into ChurnZero. If the salesperson can do that, hey, I remember I closed his account 3 months ago. How are they doing? I maybe want to use them as a reference. So you really are giving everybody the ability to get in there and understand what the customers are doing, and not have it be an annual or quarterly report where people come back and say, well, here's our here's who we lost, and we don't know really what happened, but product just build more, right? Instead of
Yeah.
build be smarter.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, quarterly is forever in the world of SaaS, isn't it?
Yeah.
How often should a SaaS company measure their churn rate?
I mean, it's for us, it's ongoing, it's constant. You can go in there and you
Mhm,
can say, how are they, we'll look at stuff monthly, but in
mhm,
terms of health scores, right? There's a churn rate, which is a little bit of it's too late once they've churned, right?
mhm,
Versus using health scores to see, okay, in
mhm,
this quarter, here are 10% of our upcoming renewing accounts are in the red. Okay, well, let's focus on the red and not focus on the
mhm.
green, because the greens are the ones are, you always have a
Highly likely to
surprise coming out of the
renew.
green, right?
Yeah.
But the reds are the ones where to put the effort and the time. And
Mhm,
then you drill down lower, you say, oh, I see why, because these three aren't using this feature, or they're having an issue, or they have too many tickets, or have no tickets, or they're not logging in.
mhm.
Like, you as a CSM know so much more to then be prescriptive and come to them and say, hey, let's talk about it. Or, as I mentioned before, it may just be launch a play. It's like marketing automation. Hey, launch this
Mhm.
play, to give them these tips, the pointers, a training session, whatever you think is going to, and you've seen is going to help them get over that
Mhm.
hurdle. Or,
Yeah.
or the phone call, like I mentioned. Sometimes it's just let's get on Zoom, let's talk it through.
Just remind them that you're there, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Hey, I mean, this is just straight LTV. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. And as a marketer, I'm thinking, wow, if the customer success guys can get the LTV higher, that means my CAC can go higher, because usually you're trying to juggle that LTV to CAC ratio. And yeah, you capture, if you can identify the highest at risk category and preserve some of those that would have otherwise churned, that just goes straight to LTV.
yeah.
Hey, in your opinion, how good are a lot of these SaaS companies? Let's say early stage SaaS companies. At what point in their journey or their life cycle should they have a really good handle on LTV?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess you need enough data to know that it's a valid number, right?
Yeah.
Where do you
Hmm.
really sit in there? So it's got to be a couple years in, so you're
Hmm.
not sort of being swayed. Your first handful of customers are probably special because you did, the product's not quite there. You're customized a little bit for them. You're being reactive. Um,
Yeah.
so I think you really have to have some established flow, and you got to have those people coming through. Whatever your renewal is, if it's monthly or annual, you have to have enough people go through to see where it is. But even that gets skewed in that first year or two, because you're building the product, you're still refining it, maybe you're still
Yeah.
figuring out, hey, this is a feature we really need, let's go develop it. And so
Yeah. And
definitely it needs inflow.
it may also be about the category. If you're a trailblazer creating a new category and you're able to get those first cohorts in because they're more of um, these people are the early adopters, let's say, and early adopters are maybe by nature prone to churn just because they want to move on to the next bleeding edge technology after yours becomes mainstream. But if you're a category creator and you're going to get in a lot of these early adopters, you probably would expect them to churn. But if you're coming into a well-established category, or if you create that category and then later it becomes more established, then probably you should expect lower churn rates because you're getting more to what's the next group after the early adopters? I mean, it's the fast followers, or
Yeah,
maybe just the more mainstream people.
yeah,
When everybody knows now this is a category like online chat or something, where of course everybody knows the category and everybody needs some solution in that category. Yeah, but we have so many conversations with fairly early stage SaaS. I'd say under 2 years, and lifetime value is not even, we don't even go there. It's kind of, and if we don't have lifetime value, we just use the annual contract value. And I know
yeah.
that's not really fair. I don't think that always leads to good decision making if you just say we have to acquire at half of our annual contract value. Uh, but there's a lot of missing details in those early stages.
There are. I mean, at those early
Yeah.
stages, I think you're just trying to. I mean, obviously, you've identified a need or a pain point, and people who really want to, companies that really want it. But at that point, it's just keep building. kind of stay focused on building the best product you can. I'm not saying you stop doing
Mhm.
that, but there is a time where you're just really focused on the product because you know what it needs to be and you know what you want to do and you need to nail that because that people are happy. Great, this is sure it's not doing everything I need, but it's doing what I'm doing and it's doing it really well.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's also where you get the loyalty, right? People are willing to give you a little
Mhm.
leeway if they know you're building a product and you're doing it right.
Yeah.
That maybe it's okay.
And
Here,
you're
I'll
gonna
give
give
you a
them
little room. Yeah,
and you're gonna give them a grandfather pricing deal
yeah,
too, correct?
right. That always helps.
Yeah, that
From
does
the
help.
buyer's side, that always helps. I'm willing to take a chance if somebody helps me with some deals.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this situation from the investor point of view now, the VCs. Tons of money flowing in, probably more than ever before. I find it hard to imagine a VC would make a serious investment in a SaaS company, maybe not too early stage, but let's say Series B. If this company didn't have a solution like yours, if they didn't have a sophisticated churn management, either a program that they did internally, which does everything that your platform does, or they just had you or somebody else. Is this a is this does this give SaaS companies a leg up when they invest?
We think it does. I mean, we
Yeah.
think we know. I mean,
And do you
that
use that in your marketing? I mean, are you emphasizing that point?
we emphasize it. I mean, we definitely emphasize the whole net revenue retention. I mean, like, look, we're going to SaaStr annual in a couple weeks, and Yuman Sang, our CEO, he's going to talk about that's his topic. Right, his topic is going to
Hmm.
be what you need to know. What are the three metrics you need
Hmm.
to talk to your investors and talk to your board. I'm not
Hmm.
going to give him away. I'll save his presentation, but I mentioned before, like net revenue retention, that is a big number for the VC and investor world. And
Hmm.
we think every company needs it and we push it. But it's just, it's getting to the point we see it when they come in and they talk to us.
Hmm.
Um, it's just a matter of kind of it breaking through. At some point, I firmly believe this. At some point, a CS platform is going to be just as prevalent as a marketing automation platform is for a marketing team. Like
Hmm.
who in a marketing organization is not going to have a marketing automation platform at this point, right? It would be crazy, and
Hmm.
rarely even do people make you prove the ROI anymore. Like back in the day, you had
It's
to show,
essential. That's
yeah,
an essential tool in the toolbox now. Yeah, and you're probably going to be soon also just one of those 5, 6, 7 tools. It's got to be in the toolbox.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And how much of churn comes down to just pricing mistakes in your experience?
I don't. My experience is very little. I kind of have a running joke when I've been buying SaaS software. There's a set number. It always seems to be, no matter what the product is.
Hmm.
So I don't think that, and because data is so available, and not everybody publishes their pricing on their pages, but at this point, people know what everybody else. Um, so my experience is it gets it right now. You can, as every company does, you can try to go down market a little bit, but
Hmm.
is that a good fit for you, right? All of a sudden you're getting smaller organizations that aren't quite ready, where you go up market and all of a sudden these organizations expect more from you. Right? Oh, you're
Hmm.
going to charge us more? Well, we want more. Right. So
Hmm.
again, my experience is between sales and marketing and leadership, there's enough concern and understanding about pricing now that for the most part, I think people get it right. But I don't know, maybe you're seeing other things or hearing from other people. But that's kind of my own
No,
little world.
yeah, no, I think I tend to agree with you. I believe there are not many excuses left for totally whiffing on
Right.
price and just totally screwing it up. You pretty much have enough precedent across most categories now. You've got precedents,
Yeah.
and you should more or less stick within a band. And as you said, decide to go a little down market, a little bit up market. But
And the tech scouts are getting so big
yeah.
too. I think at some point you can't have $500,000 worth of tech or a
Yeah.
100,000 or whatever it is. Like you may be like, oh, I love that tool, but I'm not paying $35,000 a year for that tool. Like it would be great,
Mhm.
but that's half of my CRM. You know what I mean? Like so, I think that there is probably some, um, and I've pushed back on vendors. I said, how? I mean, that's. I understand it's
Mhm.
your price, but that seems to be a little off balance compared to other tools in the tech stack that maybe have a bigger
Mhm.
impact. And
Yeah. Yeah, it is about the value ultimately, and I imagine that when those annual contracts come up, and probably the CFO's got to be involved in this decision too. They might say, "Hey, your SaaS tech stack is getting too
yeah,
it's getting too unwieldy here. You've got 35 tools now in this toolbox. We need to get this down by 10% or get the cost down by 10%." And then whoever has to trim that down then has to make those tough decisions. Where am I getting the value? Which tools are not being used too much anymore?
yep,
And and maybe then it's already too late if you're going to be in that 10%.
yeah.
If you haven't
Haven't
seen
shown
the
value
adoption.
yet. Yeah, yeah. You better again. That's why you need to know: are they using your product? Getting
Yeah.
value out of the product. And if they're not, you better get ahead of that curve before
Yeah.
not on
Yeah.
month nine, right? You need to do it on month
Yeah.
6.
Hmm. Maybe part of this churn problem is also just exacerbated by the fact that these toolboxes themselves are getting so big. There's so many specialized tools doing so many things. Most of them talk to each other pretty well. Some of them still aren't there. But at some point, maybe the churn is just, I just can't juggle 25 SaaS products anymore. And I need to get this number down to 15 just because I'm asking my team to log into 20 tools every week. And it's a nightmare.
I,
Is
I,
that,
I
is that
to,
happening?
totally agree. My experience, I've left enough, a few SaaS tools on the unused on the marketing floor, so to speak, just
Yeah.
because either getting it up and running, not having a person to do it, because on the marketing side, I mean, I think marketing ops is probably it's grown over the years, but it's probably more critical than people want to kind of give it credit for, because you got
Hmm.
to get these systems working together, sharing the data, seeing some value. And if you can't,
Hmm.
to your point, that just there's just too many things going on, and it's you can't solve all the problems with every single tool.
Yeah. Does that really benefit some of these SaaS companies that are positioning themselves as a rebundling type of solutions? Where I'm thinking of ClickUp here, they're going to bundle the project management with the time tracking, with an applicant tracking, and maybe even they're going to encroach on the CRM space pretty soon here. Does that help their churn rate by just saying that they become so essential because they've rebundled these functions?
I think it helps their stickiness, right? If I know I
Mhm.
can get 3 things out of one tool that I used to have 3 different tools,
Yeah.
maybe I sacrifice a little bit for one of those in terms of the full features.
Yeah.
But if I'm actually using it and my team is logged into one platform and the
Yeah.
data sharing, like I do think there is a case to be made that it's worth a little bit of sacrifice to
It's
get it to work.
productivity.
Yeah,
Yeah, just
yeah,
it's productivity.
it definitely is.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
is.
Do you all have ClickUp as a customer?
I don't know. I should check it.
I'll
You
look
get to
on
that
yeah.
point where you don't recognize all the names anymore. You get big
Yeah.
enough, where
How many customers do you have?
I think we almost have 500.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I think you're at the tip of the iceberg though. I mean, how many SaaS companies are out there? 20,000? Well, these are maybe that's not the right question. How many SaaS companies are out there that are ready to buy and
You
at
know,
the stage of maturity?
we think there's probably about 10,000 out there.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
So
you
you're
know,
5% penetrated your total addressable market.
yeah. So
So
we need to get
it's a
people up and
lot of
running.
room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a
Well, that's
lot of
exciting.
education. I mean,
Yeah.
um, you still got to get people comfortable with it. Like I said, that analogy of the market automation, like you can't just
Mhm.
use it if you don't know what it means and have the content and do all the different things. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's exciting. Like to your point, like why do they all use it? That's what we're saying. Why, yeah, we got to get people comfortable and understanding and seeing how it can do it, and it's not
Mhm.
overwhelming. It's a because the software has become, we've gotten so much better at making the usability and making their understanding of what they're trying to do. I mean, look, ChurnZero really is a much more sophisticated and a powerful marketing automation platform, because we use data to determine what we're going to share with you, and journeys,
Mhm.
and automated plays, and things like that. But kind of once you get hold of it, understand it, it's pretty powerful for your
Yeah.
team.
I imagine it's quite a commitment to go with you guys. Have you thought about or talked about taking a stab at a product-led growth play where you can just give somebody a taste of that value, even on their first visit to the website somehow?
We've talked about it, and I've had other companies where I've been at where that thought is, but it requires data. Like
Hmm.
that's one of the things to really take advantage of the platform, having your CRM data, but more importantly, having your product data. Having that usage
Hmm.
data come into our system so you know how someone is using the product. And that's hard to do
Yeah.
just to have someone kind of set it up. We've have some features that make it easier, just using JavaScript and things like that, but it still requires a little bit of work. I mean, not a ton, but having someone do it
Hmm.
on their own, set it up, and see the value, and it takes a little bit of time to, it's is definitely a bigger lift than we don't have set it up yet now for anybody to do.
Hmm. I take a lot of pride in trying to come up with creative product-led growth ideas for companies, and I'm still stuck here. This is a tough one because you need to harness their data to show them the value, and that's we're still in these early days, I think, of just trying to get first party data,
Yeah,
figure where, first of all, what is it? Where is it? Where does it live? How do we get it into one place like a warehouse? Um, and then how do we use it? And
yeah,
what do we do with it? And I think in your case, I'm really stuck on how you would provide an instantaneous uh, uh, experience where there would be a light bulb moment. They really just have to say, this is just a big enough priority for our company right now. We're at that stage where this is a problem that's getting too big. It's too expensive. This is a tool that has to be not a nice to have, but a need to have
yeah,
in our toolbox.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that now
let's.
it's all on marketing. We got to convince everybody
That's
that
on
that's what
you.
they need. It's on me.
Yeah.
It's on us.
Well, let's talk about your marketing, Hunter.
Yeah.
Uh, what kind of marketing mix do you have? Channels? I'm not going to ask for your budget, but what's working and what's the overall marketing landscape for you
I mean,
guys?
a lot of things we do the classic SaaS marketing, right? A lot of content, very
Hmm.
active on our blog, um, paid media, right? We're doing a lot of that. And
Hmm.
enhance our database so we know who we're going after. I mean, very targeted in terms of our the personas. Um, one of the things that because it mentioned this before, like a lot of this is about getting people comfortable with the idea of what CS is and how to be better at CS. Pre-pandemic, we were doing a lot of these regional networking events. So we'd go to in a city. We had about 30 planned for 2020. Right? I actually went to the last one in Denver. We
Oh,
held them
that's.
at a customer site. It's a
Mhm.
networking event at the end of the day. We have someone for ChurnZero, the CS leader at that customer, and then sometimes there's a lot of consultants and thought leaders out there. So we maybe have 3 people. So you do a little networking, and then you have a panel, 20 to 25 people. I've
Mhm.
done those in the past. They're okay. These were great because there's so many people in the CS world who want to understand how to be better at it. And there are a lot of people who were a CSM 6 months ago, and
Mhm.
now they're the manager of the CS team. And in 6 months, they're going to be a director of the CS team because the
Mhm.
path to get people in that is so, quick.
Mhm.
So these type of events. So when we went the pandemic, we turned them into, we call them rigs, red, yellow, green, right? That's the acronym for. So we turned them into virtual rigs. And so we started having those, and we thought, oh, if we get 50 people on those, it'll be great. Well, then we were getting 150, 250 people around a topic around CS. So we've really been leaning into, and I know it's not new, but like what are the topics that CS leaders need and understand, and and can they talk to each other, right? A lot of it is just
Mhm.
this whole idea of interacting with each other. So these events, and we had one in Boston last week. Yuman, our CEO, is there. We have one in Chicago and Denver planned for September. So we're trying to get back into that. Let's get in
Mhm.
front of people. Let's get people connected. So a lot of it is just around content that's just trying to make them really better at the CS side of it,
Mhm.
promoting our team. Our CS leaders are the ones who host these events. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the one thing we've been leaning on a lot because we do think there's an appetite for just getting much better at the CS world because it's so new, right? And
Mhm.
they need to find out people they can talk to.
I'm guessing that the CS is KPIs. They have to be churn rate and upsell. Am I right, or are there other things in
Well, I
there?
mean, there's NPS.
Yeah,
There's different
NPS
ways of
scores,
where they fit. Like
but
there's
that's a
still a
leading
lot of
indicator.
organizations. Yeah, there's still a lot of organizations that may account management, right? It's not CS, so they still
Mhm.
own that renewal. They still own the upsell. Not all CS teams are owning that. I mean, I think the more
Okay.
mature ones are. So some of them just may be any surveys, CSAT, customer, the NPS. So things like that are ways they can metrics. But I think, as you said, the more advanced ones are really looking at that, owning the churn rate, owning the upsell. And when they do that, they're very powerful and they have a lot of say in the organization.
Hmm. So back to your marketing mix, it sounds like a big investment in events, and you're looking forward to getting back to that, hopefully very soon, or you're already getting back into that. So fingers crossed, there's no
Right.
more, I don't know, nothing that will prevent us from having those events.
Right.
Um, I'm thinking about paid search and LinkedIn also just being, both of those being really critical channels. Um, on the paid search side, how do you anticipate or predict what not the obvious keywords like reduce my churn rate, but what else would somebody look for that would indicate you've got your persona, you've got a customer success person searching, but they're searching around the periphery or some adjacent type of keywords? If you can reveal any of those nuggets.
Well, I mean, I think there's some obvious one like customer onboarding. As I mentioned, onboarding
Mhm,
is really key. And it's one of our, in terms of, we publish a onboarding ebook, we have an onboarding webinar. It's
mhm,
always one of our best pieces of content because people know how important it is. That initial implementation to first few months, get in to use the product the right way. To your point earlier, right? There's enough people who forget about it. It just gets lost and no one uses it and then it churns. So if you can get them on board and doing things like that,
mhm,
you know, product walkthroughs, I think that that's a big one. I mean, we've added that as a feature in the last year because we know that once you can digitally let people walk through your product, understand the
mhm,
key parts of it, and make it very easy for you as a CS team to create those and
mhm.
make them engaging, right? So that people want to it and see it and just don't ignore it. Um,
Yeah.
but then it's the classic. It's the retention. I think it's um, it's nothing. You would think, and we've tried, we've tested other more obscure ones, but in the end, it comes down to
Mhm.
customer success, customer
Yeah.
churn,
Mhm.
revenue retention. Retention's a big one, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. How about on the other side, on LinkedIn, account-based marketing? Do you all do any of that?
we've been getting more and more into it. I think
Okay.
there is a 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was probably more hype than actual value. I think that,
Mhm.
as I think talked about earlier, the CS is probably, the platforms have kind of caught up to what CS teams are. I think ABM is finally, the technology is caught up to the value, right? The intent data,
Mhm.
the combining, like we talked for the CS on a marketing side, if I can combine all these different signals into a single platform, understand, and then take that data and use it to target people out.
Mhm.
Like the biggest area is sort of the black hole of, there's people out there, your ICP, but they don't know who you are, and you don't know who they are either, but you have to go find them. And that's where I think a
Mhm.
lot of the story of the intent data helps.
Yeah.
So I will say a enthusiastic convert now of the ABM after being a skeptic for so many years. And I think
Yeah.
it's caught up.
Yeah. I'm very curious to know. You can obviously go onto LinkedIn and you can just say, I want to target every job title with customer success. And maybe that's effective. But when you get into the intent data, then you start to reach all the, maybe not the budget holders or the decision makers, but all the influencers of those people. Then it gets really interesting because then your audience size multiplies. And I think it's equally interesting and can be effective if you reach not necessarily the decision makers, but you're getting your foot in the door with someone who will influence the decision maker. They'll take that to the decision maker. The junior CS is going to go to the director and say, "Hey, I think we need this tool to help me do my job better. Can we buy it, or can we at least look into it?" And I think that's the difference between LinkedIn's I mean, to me, LinkedIn's job title targeting is the number one targeting method there is. Um, but when you really bring in the intent data, then you're getting out to all the influencers of the budget holders and decision makers.
Yeah.
And
We love LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's as you mentioned
yeah,
is probably the best database to market to. Not for the classic demo leads, right? That's not what they're for. I mean, we've
no,
learned that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, when they're ready, you're gonna get them through paid search, of
Yeah.
course.
Right.
But you have to nurture them on LinkedIn. And I think this is something that we tell a lot of our clients and prospects as well, is that these channels don't exist in silos. There is a journey, and a lot of people will get educated, and you'll generate the demand on LinkedIn, but you won't capture it there. You'll capture it later in search. So don't attribute all the value of the paid
Right.
search budget and just say that that's a so-called all last click, because LinkedIn is creating a lot of that demand that otherwise wouldn't have been fulfilled. Um, and that's not only between those two channels. That's a lot of other channels as well, including say YouTube
Yep.
and even Facebook.
Totally
Um,
agree. Yep. Totally
yeah,
agree.
um, and I think it's interesting how content marketing overlaps quite a bit with ABM on LinkedIn too, because uh, I used to think of content marketing as we develop great content that's going to educate people and it's going to prime the top of the funnel. And we want to rank that content organically in search results. We want to get organic traffic. You still have that, but now you can use this content to build these journeys in LinkedIn, and you can actually create fuel for your ad campaigns.
Yeah.
And that's where I think you can actually leverage and to get double value from great content if you do a good job with ABM, and that content has a double, um, it can serve a double purpose. I mean, it can be very, very effective at getting people to become aware and then moving into some state of a mild interest.
Yeah. We've gotten much better in the last year and a half with the whole LinkedIn funnel, right? There is a funnel in LinkedIn, right? I'm not saying the bottom
Yeah.
of the funnel is a demo, but there is
Hmm.
that awareness and how they're moving down, and the content we target for those people is gotten much better. And I
Hmm.
like, as you said, it's telling that story, finding the right point, giving the right piece of content, and then they're going to find you and decide, okay, yeah, I'm
Hmm.
ready. I'm ready for this platform, or I need to know more. Tell me how you're going to help. And, and
Yeah.
and LinkedIn is very good at helping you to kind of bring people down that funnel.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Hunter, this has been great. I've got one more key question for you here,
Okay.
and it's really a meta one because I want to know about your churn rate. Um, how was your churn rate at ChurnZero? How was it
Our
doing?
churn rate is very good. As I
Okay.
mentioned, we use our own churn score now to forecast out the quarter, and it
Hmm.
just makes our team that much more efficient, productive, and accurate when they ultimately go back to the board and say, "Here's how we're going to do," and we feel
Hmm.
very confident because we've seen how accurate our score can be. It took time, took refinement. So
Hmm.
um, we are drinking our own champagne,
You're
eating our own dog
dog
food.
fooding,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
I had to ask. I mean, yeah, clearly
of course.
you must be using it. Um, and the other question related to that is, we talked about trying to also break apart the silos between marketing, sales, customer success. Are you, as a top marketer in your organization, do you have skin in the game on churn rate at ChurnZero?
I don't have direct skin rate,
Uh-huh.
but I for the churn rate. But we have an active conversation dialogue between sales, CS, and marketing, because as we market to people and we want to make sure we're getting the right people. But what I also do is go back into a weekly meeting with the chief customer officer, and we talk about content and features. And I say, hey, I know this new feature's coming out. Sales wants to go immediately. CS wants to hold it, right? Oh, we're not quite ready to talk about it. On the marketing side, we kind of have to balance that between the two, because we want to get
Hmm.
people excited, but you don't want to get too far ahead of it where you oversell a feature. So we are kind of that balancing between CS and sales to make sure when customers come in, they know what we're doing. We're representing ourselves accurately, not sales, not saying sales doesn't do that, but to make sure that when people, there's no surprises. There's no misconceptions. There's an understanding of what they're going to get when they come in, and not, you know, have something be totally um, offset in that communication. Did I lose you?
Hey, are you back?
Yeah. Did we get
It was a blip.
disconnected?
No worries. We'll just edit that right out.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Do you remember where you dropped off?
I don't remember where I dropped off. So
Okay, I'm gonna go into the next question because I thought I had only one more, but that led me to another question, which is that I see it as a circle or a loop where you're arming salespeople for success. Those salespeople should set up the customer success people for success. But then those CS people need to feed they need to feed stuff back to marketing, like case studies
mhm.
and maybe other stuff, but they need to tell the stories. They need to tell those, they have the customer success. They need to tell those stories and give you that, arm you with those case studies. Is that happening at ChurnZero?
It is, and we have a couple ways to do that. And this is kind of back to as you integrate the data. And I mentioned the Slack thing before. We have a channel in Slack that pulls out when we do called success stories, and we do our MPS and we do other surveys. And when people come back and they have kind of a success story, it gets triggered and it gets populated into Slack. Everybody in the company can subscribe to the channel. Marketing does. We look at it, we identify it, and we say, "Hey, that's a pretty good, interesting story." Because, and not only just case studies. Case studies are kind of, yes, they're what you ultimately want to get. But they're big. They require a lot of interviewing, a lot of approval. Where just getting a blog topic where you get to quote 3 customers on the same topic because you've seen it
Mm-hmm.
kind of come through. We also have a customer community, and those are great places to find like
Mm-hmm.
how customers are using your platform because they're interacting with each other, not you. They're
Yeah.
saying, fellow customer, I've used this, who's done that. Like, they
Yeah. You
share
get
these
the voice
stories.
of the customer. Yeah.
So you pull those out. And then we have now with the CS team, biweekly, they highlight a customer. They do a half an hour kind of little highlight of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think it's interesting, or if it's an area that we sort of are deficient in content, right? Like, hey, that's one topic we don't have we'll go, and
Yeah.
we did one 2 weeks ago, and we're now going to do a case study with that customer because
Great.
it was a
Yeah.
great story, and the CS person is going to be able to kind of bring that to the top. But as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, the other one though, the Slack one and the community is better because it doesn't require you going to the CS team and saying, "Hey, do you have any customers you want to highlight? Do you have any stories you want to share?" They're so busy with their job. And sure, there's
Yeah.
some that they want to do, but when you can pull it out yourself as a marketing
Mm-hmm.
team, and you go back to the CSM and say, "Hey, we want to highlight XYZ company. Are you cool with that?" "Oh yeah, yeah, no, they're great. Let me know, if you need anything from
Mm-hmm.
me." Or, "No, no, 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 their renewal's coming up. Can you hold off?" Right? So as long as you know how to do that and no one's caught off guard, or you go in
Yeah.
and they've got like 5 support tickets and you don't want to contact them because you can see that. So
Yeah.
that's the ability where marketing, um, when we can be self-sufficient somewhat and we can find those
Mm-hmm.
nuggets ourselves, and they can be micro comments, that's where
That's
we get the
you
best.
just you just said the word that was on the tip of my tongue, which is nuggets.
Yeah.
These are the nuggets that marketing needs. They don't need necessarily in a complete case study. They don't need material for another white paper or something. They just need those nuggets. Give me a couple of good quotes here and there, um, so that I can fill in the gaps, or
Yeah.
I can just pepper that around.
Right.
I think that's what so much of marketing now is now that there's some fatigue around long form content, and I think it's coming back to short form, even micro short form, because people want to consume so much faster. The attention spans on mobile are getting shorter and shorter, and a really good nugget can be just as effective as a 100-page ebook or a slick case study
Yeah.
if it's delivered at the right time to the right person.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
awesome. Hunter, it's been great. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wished I would have asked you, or anything that you'd like for our audience to know?
I don't know. This has been a really good conversation. I've been talking for a while. I love this. Love to be able to get out and talk to other people. You're kind of we're stuck in the Zoom world, or a few people in the office. So
Yeah.
Not that I can think of. He hit
Okay.
them all.
All right. Great. Well, everybody, it's ChurnZero. So our SaaS audience, if you haven't checked them out, you got to check them out. It's something that can help probably your biggest problem, which is churn and retention. So Hunter, thanks very much for being with me today, and appreciate the time.
Oh, thank you. It's been great.
All right.